Okay, doctorarjaybe. Um, and today's lecture is going to be on cultural food practices or cultural food um, and how this affects a person's wellness. Now, in a previous video, I talked about the idea of eating insects. And of course, there are cultural, inhibitions about eating insects. But there's also cultural inhibitions about other foods too. I saw one of the Food Channel um, uh, series, and the chef who was doing the touring was going harvesting for oysters. And because of cultural food preferences, the fisherman who was harvesting the oysters had never eaten an oyster. He thought it was disgusting to eat an oyster. So he never ate them. Um, and here it is. We have people in our country who will go through dozens of them in one sitting. And this guy had never even had one oyster. Um, the host, ate one of the oysters raw right out from the ocean. Told the fisherman, "Why don't you try it? Give it a shot." And the fisherman made a really sour look on his face. He ate it. He said, "It's not too bad," you know. So he was able to get beyond some of his negative feelings about that food, and able to see what it actually tasted like. There's a lot of this stuff going on. Um, uh, uh, there's also, a story about the United States sending, um, a certain grain. I think it's either corn or wheat. I'm not sure. I remember which one it was, but they sent it to an area in Africa, and the people wouldn't eat it because they did not eat that kind of food. They ate a different grain, and they just found the grain that we gave them unpalatable. They just didn't care for it. So, this was a strange food for them. And even though they were starving, they didn't want to eat something that they didn't like. Um, so, here, these people would prefer to starve to death than eat a food that they didn't care for. Again, that's, strange, but it's really true. Um, in another video that was on the news, they were talking about this other area in Africa, and uh, the the interviewer was interviewing, a child on it, and she noticed that this child was looking very healthy, and she says, "How is it that you're so healthy when so many of the people in this country are starving to death?" And he said, "Well, those people are idiots," he said. "They have too much pride. Um, I eat what the monkeys eat," he said. "They would be ashamed if they ate what the monkeys eat. I looked what the monkeys were eating and I noticed that they were eating certain leaves on the tree. So I decided I was going to eat them too. And they tasted fine. Um, uh, and I got plenty of good nutrition from them. And I put on weight. These people, because they're, feeling ashamed that they would be eating like a monkey, won't eat the leaves. And so they're going to starve to death. So it's their own darn fault, you know. Well, I think again, you're talking about cultural differences. Um, this child realized that he had to overcome some of his cultural problems so that he could eat a food that would keep him alive. Um, the other people, because of their belief system, wouldn't touch anything that would be eaten by a monkey, and so they continue starving rather than eat something that might help them. Now, again, cultural differences, cultural beliefs, and you got to ask a question of what kind of culture problems in our country too. Um, I can tell you one thing is that down south, the food tends to be very greasy because everything is fried. And so what that means is that those people have a high fat intake. That may mean problem with their cholesterol, or maybe because of the use of salt, in the food, the blood pressure or something. So, even in our own country, we have people who eat differently in certain areas of the country than other areas. Maybe you go out west, in California, maybe eat more fruits and vegetables. Um, you go down to a poorer area, let's say in Georgia or something like that, maybe the people are eating less fruits and vegetables and more fried foods. So even in our country, there are cultural differences. The old-fashioned, the family foods are important for all people, but sometimes you have to investigate other things. So hopefully this was instructive, and see some of my other videos.